this is Joyce Pellino Crane. I'm the news director here at WestfordCAT. I've got a special guest with me in the studio today, Amy Pessia. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Joyce, for having me.
She is the executive director of the Merrimack Valley Foodbank.
It's my privilege to serve alongside a talented, dedicated group of staff and volunteers and donors of our mission.
That's wonderful. Why are you here today?
It's always our pleasure to tell people in as many ways as possible about the neighbors in our region who find themselves in need of help with something as basic as food, and to tell people about the food bank's role and of our member agencies in providing relief for our neighbors.
So it's so funny because years ago, when I was much younger, I once did the Walk for Hunger for Project Bread, and I was very aware that there were food shortages and not everybody was getting a good meal. I don't hear that so much anymore.
It is. It's an interesting phenomenon, I'll call it. That might sound like a dramatic word to use, but viewers will be surprised to know that there are people right in our community where we sit in Westford who need help with food. There are people in the most affluent communities who, for many different reasons, find themselves asking for help with food. And I always like to share examples, and there's a specific story that I'd like to share.
Sure.
About one of our team members who works at the food bank. She's one of our 15 team members who help provide food to numerous people throughout the region. And she also volunteers at the Drake Food Pantry. And she was helping people check in one Saturday when they were open. And who was next in line was a classmate of hers in high school.
Oh, my goodness.
Who was so embarrassed to be there, and she was probably nervous to go anyway, fearful that somebody she knew would be there also. And she was so relieved to get a hug from her former classmate and to be able to tell her story about how her daughter had some trouble recovering from surgery, and her daughter was raising her 3 little kids alone, and she just couldn't manage helping the 3 kids and try to get better at the same time. So the kids and daughter moved in with this woman who was pretty close to retiring from her job. And due to the extra help that the kids needed and that her daughter needed with doctor's appointments, school meetings, etc., her employer let her go. And she was in a situation where she had these extra mouths to feed, and she herself needed to make sure she kept her strength up so that she could help her daughter and the kids. So she got groceries, and her shame and embarrassment melted away when she was able to at least get that little piece of the challenges that she was going through taken care of.
Yes.
I feel like we all can manage things better when we have a full stomach. And then there are people who need to take medication with food. And if they're trying to decide whether they have enough to buy food or that medication copay, we don't want people to have to make that choice. And it really makes it a public health concern at that point, because in many cases, food is medicine. And if you're eating the right foods, which we manage so many nutritious foods that we get from a number of different sources, and when people are in need so that they can get through until they can overcome their challenges, then we're pleased to be able to do that. And we do that through partnerships with food pantries.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the structure of the food bank and how many people it serves. How long has it been there? Give us a little background.
We've been serving the region since 1991. And we started as a program of the Lowell Transitional Living Center, which at the time was called Middlesex Shelter. And back in 1991, a group of community and business leaders realized that there was a need to collect and safely store and then distribute quantities of food donations that the smaller agencies couldn't handle. So that's when the food bank came into existence, and we have been operating out of a mill building, old mill building, since 1995 in Lowell on Broadway Street. Mm-hmm. And we're fortunate to own the building.
So how did, you're saying it came about, mm-hmm. but like how did it come about? Was there someone with deep pockets who funded the project?
That's interesting that you ask. Back then, and what continues to be our sources of support and what help us get our mission accomplished, so to speak, is the support of individuals, families, faith-based organizations, corporate partners.
But wait. Before that, I mean, I understand that mm-hmm. that's who's funding it, but how did it get started? I mean, all those people weren't on board on day one, right?
That's true. We, when we started, it wasn't in our current location. We had donated space that we would store the donated food.
Who went out and got the donated space?
That group of business and community members mm-hmm. who used their own funds, and then they gathered friends and family members to contribute further to the mission. And we would have to rent a U-Haul truck to go pick up donations, and then that donated space included donated utilities, etc.
So today, how many restaurants are you affiliated with?
We typically don't get donations from restaurants because prepared food is pretty tricky to manage.
So where's the food coming from?
The food comes from a number of sources, including contracts with the state and federal government. Mm-hmm. We and the other 3 food banks in the state, which are the Greater Boston Food Bank of Western Mass, and the Worcester County Food Bank, all receive a percentage of the line item in the state and federal budget for food banks. Mm-hmm. And that line item, which is a financial line item, is used for food purchases. We have access to food commodities throughout the country that range from canned vegetables, canned fruit, tomato products, rice and pasta, to proteins, which often come in frozen, ground beef, ground turkey, chicken, and also fresh produce. Mm-hmm. We have a refrigerated building that's part of our property, mm-hmm. and in that we're able to store apples from Parley Farm, for example, corn from Parley Farm that's donated in generous quantities throughout the growing season, and those other commodities that we have. We partner with individuals who either oversee or have their own gardens. During the growing season, they bring in those donations. And also, the community really steps up when we make that call for food donations, and also, especially this time of year, in November and December, we get probably the largest volume of food donations than any other time throughout the year.
Yeah, this is the time when people think about it.
It is.
And then what happens in January?
In January, our food supplies will start going out into the community through our member agencies in a large volume, and the donations that our member agencies also get this time of year will start getting depleted. And that's the time of year that people in our communities that we serve have to turn up their heat, because we're in the coldest months of the year.
So you're talking January, February.
January and February, and even into March, because we have a pretty long winter here in New England.
Yes, if only it wasn't.
And people have to make that decision whether to pay their bills or to buy food. And
or to buy their prescription medicine.
Exactly. And oftentimes food is the last thing on the list that people can make that investment in. And we live in a very expensive part of the country where the living expenses are pretty high, whether it's rent, mortgage, utilities, because of the harsh winters and the warm summers. And utility costs for a lot of us really spike during different parts of times of the year, and people need to eat in order to stay healthy.
You were saying that it can happen very suddenly if you lose someone who loses a job, gets sick.
Yes.
I don't know what the third leg might be, but losing a job and getting sick is can be pretty.
Those are some of the incidents or life experiences that can put someone in a position to need help from a food pantry. And others are aging. There are a number of, and we're living longer these days, which is excellent. Medical advances are allowing us to stay around longer, fortunately. But there still are challenges that come with aging, and there are many homebound people, and even if people are not homebound, they're fortunate enough to own their own home. There are other living expenses that make it impossible for people to maintain a healthy lifestyle, and that's what's known as food insecurity. Is that there's a lack of enough resources so that all members of the household have access to healthy food.
80,000 per month served. That's up from 2008, 35 when you did 35,000 a month.
Yes, in 2008, our average numbers of people served per month were 35,000. In 2016, that number spiked to almost 80,000, and we were surprised. I had to question that and ask our team, are you sure about that number? So I called a couple of our member agencies, and what surprised us also was that it was in the summer that number spiked up to almost 80,000.
So what happens in the summer?
People may be surprised to know that the summer is one of our times of highest demand at the food bank from our member agencies, because they hear from parents and grandparents who are raising their grandchildren that they need help with food the most because the kids aren't in school getting breakfast and lunch. And during the school year, children get 2/3 of their calories from school meals. Over the summer, if they're not participating in a program that provides that meal, the family is, those kids sometimes want to eat 3 meals a day, and they need it because they're growing, and they need it to continue developing and be ready to learn when they return to school in September or August these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was just, I'm sitting here remembering how hard it was to come up with 3 meals a day for the 3 of us, because I had 2 boys.
And they when they're growing, when they're in their growth spurts, that's when they really need those calories.
Yes.
And I mentioned the refrigerated building that we have at the food bank. We have, just to give folks some perspective of the the volume of food that we manage, and I'm reluctant to sound so transactional, but in our fiscal year 2019, which just ended June 30th, we distributed 3.75 million pounds of food, which translates into almost 3 million meals.
It's remarkable.
And we have a food distribution center. We call it that because we're not just storing the food. We take it in through those sources that I mentioned, the state and federal contracts. We go pick up donations as well. We have 2 large refrigerated trucks that also have freezer capabilities, because if a donor has frozen product that will suit the needs of the people that we serve, we'll go pick it up and store it in our either refrigerated room or in our walk-in freezer.
So if it's not a restaurant that's donating the food, or when you're picking up this food that might be donated, where would that come from?
Food manufacturers and distributors and brokers are some of the entities that will donate food to us that we'll go pick up. And then sometimes we'll get beautiful donations that are rejected from a supermarket because they're not the right kind based on what the supermarket ordered. For example, the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, we got a call from a trucking dispatcher who said, we have numerous pallets of corn on the cob that were rejected, and the reason they were rejected, because we have to ask why they were rejected, was because there were 2 other tractor trailers already waiting to be unloaded at that receiving dock. So it was a mistake on the part of the person ordering. Oh. They over-ordered. And that receiver said, we can't take it, and that truck driver can't go back to where they got it. They have to go pick up another load. So the receivers at the supermarket companies will give those drivers our phone number. And they delivered the corn, and although it was in the refrigerator over the long weekend, when our member agencies like the Westford Food Pantry came for their shopping appointment on that Tuesday, they had access to that fresh corn.
Nice. So you're connected to how many communities in the region?
Over 30 communities are receiving food from the Merrimack Valley Foodbank donations.
And you've been there 17 years.
Yes.
You started out as a volunteer?
Yes. Over 20 years ago, I got involved with the food bank as a volunteer. I served on the board of directors, and when a position came available in 2002, I said, okay, this is my passion. This is how I want to spend the next several years. I really didn't know how long I would be involved, Joyce, but it's something that I feel so strongly about, as do the other 14 staff members that we have working with us, and we log probably 4,000 hours of volunteer time each year from people in the community who share our concern and care for the well-being of children, families, seniors,
But you and the staff, you're paid, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and the staff is paid?
Yes.
And then you've got an army of volunteers as well?
We have an army of angels who help us get that nutritious food out to the community. And
as you said, you're in Lowell.
Yes.
Where in Lowell are you?
We're physically located at 733 Broadway Street. And we had an old mill building donated to us.
Wow.
From a family that operated a produce company out of the property for several years. And even more interesting is that my maternal grandfather worked for the produce company. And it's really, I feel like it's a blessing to be able to work in the same building where he did and to be able to serve the community.
So Why? Why do you do it?
Food is so plentiful in this area and in this country, and it took a few years for me to get my footing, if you will, and instead of just being an emergency feeding agency, I've worked with our staff and board of directors and volunteers to make it a way for people to access nutritious food. And that is that's probably one of the biggest challenges for people that need help with food, because there's plenty of it. It's a matter of accessing it.
Right.
And in addition to the way that we get food out to the 30 communities through food pantries, shelters, and meal programs, we operate our own ways to provide food to vulnerable populations. I mentioned the kids needing food over the summer. To combat that, we partner with numerous agencies throughout Lowell and provide between 10 and 12,000 meals to children who are participating in activities through parks and recreation programs, the YWCA in Lowell, a couple of housing properties that do programming for residents, all get meals and snacks for the children that are participating. So that's at least one meal and snacks that the parents don't have to worry about. And during the school year, we partner with Chelmsford, Lowell, and the Greater Lowell Technical High School schools to provide nutrition for children, whether it's over the weekends when they're not in school. And we also have facilitated pantries to be set up at the Greater Lowell Technical High School and at Lowell High School, so that when high school students are facing challenges at home, maybe the entire family is facing a challenge, or maybe they're having some conflict with a family member and they just need to get that, you know, a couple of granola bars, or be able to have microwavable mac and cheese so that they have limited interaction with those family members. It helps them to either play sports, participate in activities after school, and then be able to face whatever obstacles are in front of them. And the other vulnerable population that we were talking about earlier are seniors and people with disabilities. We adopted our mobile pantry program from MACOM, which was one of the largest employers in the area back in the 90s, and we adopted the mobile pantry program from them, and we continue to provide home grocery delivery service to over 300 individuals in Greater Lowell. And those groceries are about 28 meals worth of food, and they're delivered by the same volunteer every month. So not only are people getting that nutritional support so that they can fulfill their financial obligations, but they're getting some socialization as well.
Wonderful. So we only have about a minute left, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to just, wrap it up and make sure you tell the residents what you want them to know.
We appreciate the support that we've received from many of the people watching and from corporate partners here in Westford, including Red Hat, Net Scout, and the Westford Rotary Club is a huge supporter of the Foodbank. And there are so many ways that people can support us, whether it's through financial donations, food donations, and their volunteer time. And through those gifts, people can help us help our neighbors that need help with food.
What's your fundraising goal for the year?
It takes a little over $1 million a year to operate the programs that we do. And our we have fundraising events, and we also gladly accept financial donations throughout the year. And people can find out more about us by looking on our website, which is mvfb.org.
M as in Mary, V as in Victor, F as in Frank, and B
as in boy.org, and our phone number is 978-454-7272.
Wonderful. Amy, thank you so much for visiting WestfordCAT Studios today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me as well. For WestfordCAT News, this is Joyce Pellino Crane. See you around town.